Thank you. This is application 1104-19, Provco Newtown LLC, who is the owner and challenger. This is a substantive validity challenge to certain sections of the Newtown Township Joint Municipal Zoning Ordinance of 2007 as amended. The challenger specifically challenges the validity of section 803.E-30.3 related to the permitted number and required arrangement of fuel dispensers for a motor vehicle fueling and convenience store use. Section 1103.C.4 related to the permitted location of signs along the limited access portion of the Route 332 bypass, and section 1101A related to the definition of an electronic message center. The subject property is located at the southwest corner of the Newtown bypass and Upper Silver Lake Road, Newtown, Pennsylvania, in the OR Office Research District, being further known as tax map parcel 29-010-042. Before we begin, we have some exhibits that we are going to mark. Exhibit 1 is the 2019 application and exhibits. Exhibit 2 is the 2022 amended application and exhibits, addendum and letter to the zoning hearing board requesting a hearing prior to February 28, 2023. Exhibit 3 is a copy of the notice. Exhibit 4 is the proof of publication, which occurred on January 13, 2023 and January 20th, 2023. Exhibit 5 is the proof of posting. Exhibit 6 is a copy of the mailed notice and list of neighboring property owners who received notice. Exhibit 7 are email responses from Dave Sander and John Van Luvanee on behalf of their clients, indicating that they do not object to having a 4-member board this evening, with the understanding that Mr. Bill Wall, who is not present this evening, will read tonight's transcript prior to the next hearing. Unless some miracle occurs and we finish tonight, which I don't think anyone thinks is going to happen, the next hearing will be on Monday, March 6, 2023 at 7 p.m. In this room. For those who are in attendance this evening, there will be no public comment during tonight's hearing. Public comment will occur at the end of testimony from both the applicant and from the township. At this time, if there is anyone who is seeking party status in this matter, we would ask that you come forward and we will discuss whether or not you are going to be granted party status. Again, party status has nothing to do with making public comment. All members of the public will be able to make public comment at the conclusion of the testimony in this matter. Party status means you will actually be participating as a party. You will be cross-examining witnesses. You will be presenting testimony on your own. Is there anyone in the audience this evening who is seeking party status?
Peter Nelson on behalf of Upper Makefield Township.
Mr. Van Luvanee and or Mr. Sander, do you want to be heard on the issue of whether or not granting Upper Makefield Township party status in this matter?
Upper Makefield zoning ordinance, so I don't see any basis for which I couldn't check.
I was hoping John would see that. Thank you, Mr. Clark. No, obviously no objection.
Besides that, I like Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Nelson, if you would like, there seems to be an open table, an open seat. Looks like they anticipated that you were going to be showing up this evening. So Mr. Van Luvanee, Mr. Sander, and Mr. Nelson, do any of you wish to make very brief opening remarks?
Before we...
the opening remarks, 2 comments on housekeeping. The parties there are no microphones at your tables, so we'll just ask you to please keep your voices up until the witnesses so that our court reporter can take down your testimony. And of course, everybody, please allow others to speak and not talk over anybody. Also, our plan this evening is to go until 9 p.m. We will be reconvening, as Mr. Glassman said, on March 6th. So we will expect to continue at that point in time.
Mr. Van Luvanee.
I have a very brief opening statement. This is obviously a matter of challenging the ordinance, so we're dealing with questions of law here. Signage is the subject of 2 of the 3 challenges, but the legal standard is essentially the same. We're alleging that these ordinance provisions are arbitrary, unreasonable, discriminatory, and void. I'm assuming that at the end of the case, you're going to want findings of fact and conclusions of law, so I'm not going to make an extended legal argument tonight on the merits. I'll leave the evidence speak for itself, and we can sum that up at the end. I have 4 witnesses tonight. I have a 5th witness who was unavailable tonight. I believe he'll be unavailable on March 6th, but if he isn't, I'll probably decide to close up my case with that. I think I can move through the 4 witnesses tonight reasonably promptly. If Mr. Sander and Mr. Nelson don't have extended cross, maybe we should be out here by 9 o'clock. Should be finished by 9 o'clock. That's my hope. As I said, the issues are reasonably simple. I think all the parties, the 2 townships and the board, all have a copy of my pre-marked exhibit book. Just introductory, there are 3 exhibits that I just want to comment on. Number 1, which I included just as a matter of convenience, is a copy of the application for the hearing and my addendum. It doesn't have all of the other pages. I think there were about 70 pages in the application. This is just the substantive stuff, so if anybody wanted to go back and leaf through it, they could find it. Exhibit 2 is a duplication again of one of the exhibits that was one of the attachments to the application. That's a copy of the special warranty deed conveying the subject to the property owned by Provco, Newtown, to my client. Again, I think that was part of the application, but for the sake of making sure that the question is standing, I've included it. Exhibit A11 is a copy of this board's decision in appeal number 1138-21, which dealt with some similar issues that are raised in this case. But again, it's here, so we won't have to go back and find it if you didn't bring it with you tonight, if there's a reference to it, or if we want to go back and see what was done in the prior case. That case, as you all know, is on appeal right now. But I think because the issues are similar, I believe that it should be reviewed. And you can always take judicial notice of your own decision. All right, with that, I'd like to call my first witness, Jason Korczak. I have a copy of the...
Mr. Van, in the earlier proceeding, did Mr. Korczak testify?
He did.
And he was admitted as an expert by this board?
He was admitted as an expert in civil engineering. And
but Mr. Sander and Mr. Nelson, I think you can agree we don't need to go through his qualifications to
Mr. Nelson wasn't here, so he may have some questions, and I thought, it's not going to take me very long, Mike, if you don't mind, just assume, go through it very quickly, and then David can, Peter can cross-examine if he has any questions. You're right, my witnesses are duplicates tonight of the witnesses that you heard in the prior proceeding. But again, I would make it wasn't part of it, so I may have to go through qualifications briefly.
Understood. I understand that you want it as part of the record. I think that makes sense, but I also think we can agree that there's not going to be extensive cross-examination of these witnesses since they've already been accepted by the board as experts in the field, although they will, this is a separate proceeding, so we will need to be sworn.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Just spell your name for me.
Jason, Jason Korczak, Korczak.
Just keep your voices up for me.
I was just going to say that, Jason, you heard the admonition that we all have to talk loudly. Mr. Nelson's all the way down at the end of the room there, and he's blocked by two other people, so we're going to have to really keep up. Unless Peter wants to put his chair here in the middle where he can hear easy.
No, thank you.
Jason, by whom are you employed?
Bohler Engineering.
In what capacity?
I'm a civil engineer.
And are you a registered professional engineer in Pennsylvania?
Yes, I am.
And in New Jersey?
Yes.
What are your job responsibilities or your job description of Bohler?
Responsibilities include overall site design and calculations for projects I'm working on, as well as any permitting that would be required for the project.
And what is your educational background?
I have a Bachelor's of Science degree from the State University of New York at Buffalo.
And have you been, how many years have you been employed by Bohler?
21.
And has that been your entire professional career?
Yes.
Bohler? And have you and Bohler been involved in the civil engineering and design of the Wawa project out of which this term appeal arises?
Yes.
And how many Wawa projects have you personally been involved with as project manager?
As project manager, I would say I've been involved 6 to 8. But my entire career, I've worked on Wawa projects from design engineer up, and I would say I've worked on over 20 Wawa projects.
And you worked on projects other than Wawa projects, is that correct?
Yes.
And have you previously been accepted as an expert in civil engineering by municipal bodies, including zoning hearing boards other than this board?
Yes.
And you did provide a testimony before this board in the hearings that took place on the 2021 case. That was appeal number 113821 before this board, is that correct?
Yes.
And as Mr. Clark indicated, as we agreed, you were accepted as an expert in that hearing, correct?
Correct.
And behind tab 3 of the exhibit booklet, one is exhibit A3, is this a copy of your professional resume,
Yes, it is.
including your licensure, your educational background, and the general description of your work responsibilities.
Correct.
Again, I'm offering Mr. Korczak as expert in civil engineering.
Mr. Nelson, do you have any questions for Mr. Korczak?
Mr. Korczak, have you ever represented anything on the municipal side of things?
No, I haven't.
Okay. And have you done primarily commercial work or commercial and residential?
Commercial and residential.
Thank you. No objections.
Mr. Korczak will be admitted as an expert in civil engineering.
All right, Mr. Korczak, prior to its purchase of the subject property, was Bohler engaged by Provco to assist in the evaluation of the property located currently along the Newtown bypass?
Yes.
That is the subject of this property.
Yes.
This appeal. Did you prepare plans for that project?
Yes, I did.
Would you take a look, please, at the exhibit A4 behind tab 4 and maybe identify that exhibit for the record?
Yes, that is the survey prepared by Control Point Associates. This survey was utilized as the base for our zoning plans and future land development plans that were prepared.
And would you, again, just briefly, by the way, if the board or either municipality would like full-size copies of these reduced plans, we'll be more than happy to provide. So just let me know tonight or by email after tonight's hearing, and I'll be happy to send full-size copies. Mr. Korczak, can you describe generally the topography of the property?
Sure. Let's start with Newtown bypass. It's going to be along the top of the page. You can see the steep embankment that exists today. That embankment's approximately 10 feet above the bypass. The highest point in elevation on the property would be what I'll call the northern or northeastern corner of the property, right at the intersection of the bypass and Lower Silver Lake Road, which runs along the northeast to south side of the property. There's quite a bit of fall and elevation from the property. Once again, that northern corner at the intersection is the highest. The lowest would be the southern corner, furthest down on North Silver Lake Road.
But generally speaking, is it fair to say the property slopes from north to south?
That's correct.
And I think it's evident from the survey, but this property has a somewhat irregular shape. Do you agree?
I would agree.
What is the boundary of the property on the west side?
Along the west side, the adjacent property is property owned by Pico.
Is there any direct access to this property from the bypass?
No,
Is any portion of the property located within 1,000 feet of the bypass right of way?
yes, the entire property.
In other words, no property is located within 1,000 feet, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Are you familiar with the adjacent uses?
I'm a little confused by that.
No, all right, let me rephrase the
Yeah,
question.
could
All
you
right.
please? Thank
Mr.
you.
Korczak, is any portion of this property located within 1,000, or outside of 1,000, no, strike that. Is the entire property located within 1,000 feet of the Newtown bypass right of way?
Yes, it is.
Okay. For the record, I'll withdraw the two prior questions and we'll live with the third one, all right? Are you familiar with the adjacent uses?
Yes, I am.
And what are they?
Okay, on the opposite side of Lower Silver Lake Road is the Crossing Community Church. We talked about along the western property line that there is a Pico property that has overhead high transmission lines that run through the property. On the opposite side of Newtown bypass, there is a office commons, which I believe also has a fitness facility.
And what is the zoning of the subject property?
Office research, or
Do you know what the zoning is, the property across the street or not? If you don't, that's fine. Zoning map speaks for itself. Do you know?
I'm not
All
sure.
right. What is the size of this property?
The size of the property is 4.95 acres.
Provco's proposed use of this property is as a use E30 motor vehicle fuel and convenience store, is that correct?
Yes,
Based on your review of the municipal zoning ordinance, is that use E30 the only use other than single-family detached dwelling that can be developed on property in the OR district having a lot size of less than 15 acres without obtaining a variance from the minimum lot size requirement?
yes. It is possible that a public utility operating facility could also be provided on a property smaller than 15 acres, but that is not specified in the ordinance.
In other words, there's no minimum lot size specified for utility use, is that correct?
That's correct.
Could you turn to Exhibit A5 behind tab 5 and identify this exhibit for the record?
Yes, that is the rendering of the zoning plan that we submitted for this application.
And was this also, by coincidence, the same plan that was submitted to the zoning hearing board in the application that we've identified previously, in which a decision was attached as Exhibit A11 was rendered?
Yes, it was.
How many fuel dispensers are shown on this plan?
There's a total of 8 fuel dispensers shown on this plan. The plan does show a couple areas of the gasoline canopy. Gasoline canopy would be located between the Wawa convenience store and Newtown bypass. Basically, the E30 ordinance would require a canopy of 3,000 square feet. That would cover about four pumps. A canopy that could cover 6 pumps could be approved by the Board of Supervisors.
You say pumps, you mean dispensers, correct?
Fuel dispensers, yes. And then the area that's outlined in green would represent the canopy that would be required to cover all 8 pumps shown.
Now, as you review the zoning ordinance, are 6 dispensers permitted on this property as a matter of right?
Yes, they are.
What is the minimum lot size required for the use A30?
E30 will be 4 acres.
You said this property is 4.95, correct?
That's correct.
From an engineering standpoint, Mr. Korczak, is there any reason why a 7 or 8 fuel dispenser could not be placed on the site?
There isn't.
In fact, you've shown that on the plan.
That's correct.
With the horizontal layout of the plan, we'll strike that. Did you also prepare and submit land development plans? Did you prepare and did Provco submit land development plans to the Newtown Township Board of Supervisors for review?
Yes.
Were those plans, or was the basic layout of the site the same on that plan?
Yes, it was.
And how many fuel dispensers were shown on the plan that you submitted for approval?
There were six fuel dispensers on that plan.
So the site plan, the layout, the site, or the proposed convenience store, traffic circulation did not change between the 6 and the 8, or would not change between 6 and 8 fuel dispensers.
That's correct. The only difference would be the 7th and 8th fuel dispenser would be closer to the western property line, and the drive aisle would move over to accommodate those additional fuel dispensers.
You testified that you worked on approximately 20 other Wawa project sites. For those sites, have you ever worked on a tract of land that was larger than this tract?
Not that I recall. This is the largest tract of land for a Wawa project I've worked on. It wasn't part of an overall shopping center development.
In other words, a multi-use project.
Multi-use project, yes.
Provco, and has Wawa previously developed sites that are smaller than the subject property for Wawa convenience stores with fuel?
Yes.
And have you had smaller sites with 8 fuel dispensers?
Yes.
At the 2021 hearings before the zoning hearing board, Provco requested an interpretation by the zoning hearing board of the provisions of the zoning ordinance of JMZO that prohibits any sign facing the bypass that is located within 1,000 feet of the right of way of the bypass. You're aware that that variance was denied by the board?
Yes.
You're not? Now, does this plan, I know it's a small one, but you show the location of the 2 signs that were the subject of the hearing before the board in 2021?
Yes.
Okay. Let's concentrate on the one that's nearest the bypass. First of all, there's an entrance on Lower Silver Lake Road that is, I'll call it on this lower part of the property, the main entrance to the site, correct?
Correct.
There's a sign proposed there, is there not?
Yes.
And did you testify previously that that sign is not going to be visible from the bypass?
Yes, I did. I compared line of sight elevations, profiles that confirm that.
All right. With respect to the sign that you show up closer to the bypass, outside the right of way, what is that location that you're showing there? Where is it located in relation to the right of way?
In relation to the right of way, it is approximately 10 feet off, right at the northern corner. It is a dimension of, I believe it's approximately 50 feet from the actual cartway of Newtown bypass.
Have you reviewed the locational criteria for signage in the JMZO in this zoning district for freestanding signs?
Yes.
Do you have a professional opinion as to whether, with the exception of the prohibition of signs within 1,000 feet of the bypass that are visible from the bypass, should the freestanding sign be erected at the location that you just testified to outside of the legal right of way of the bypass, in compliance with the locational criteria that apply to freestanding signs in the OR district?
Yes.
And what is your opinion?
My opinion is that although the signage is relatively small, it could be made so that it complies with the height, the maximum height of the freestanding sign, which is 5 feet in height, as well as the area, which given the setback from the Newtown bypass cartway as well as the Lower Silver Lake Road cartway, could be 16 square feet.
I believe at the last hearing, at the 2021 hearing before the board, you also introduced the sign, what I'll call the scrolling sign module that Wawa is proposing as an alternative to an LED sign, or what we typically would think of as an LED price sign, right? Is that correct? Right. Behind tab is 6, marked as exhibit A6. I have a 2-page exhibit. Have you reviewed that exhibit?
Yes,
And do you recognize this as, first of all, a letter that was received from the manufacturer of the scrolling sign module, explaining how the sign works, and then a picture of this was an exhibit that we introduced at the last hearing also, correct?
yes.
Are you aware of how the sign panels, the translucent panels that have the numbers on them will be illuminated?
Yes.
And how will they be illuminated?
The sign is internally illuminated, it will be backlit so that light would shine through the Mylar letters or numbers, whatever the sign is displayed.
Now, have you reviewed section 1103D1 of the Joint Municipal Zoning Ordinance?
Yes,
That sign, does that section generally permit signs to be directly illuminated?
yes,
The ordinance defines direct illumination as illumination of a sign designed to give forth artificial light directly through transparent or translucent materials from the source of light within such sign. In your professional opinion, is the scrolling sign module that was proposed and is being proposed a sign that is directly illuminated in a manner consistent with section 1103D1?
yes,
So in your opinion, do you have an opinion, Mr. Korczak, as to whether if this sign had not been classified or was not classified as an electronic message center, would it, in your opinion, meet all the other requirements of the Joint Municipal Zoning Ordinance?
yes.
It concludes my direct examination, Mr. Korczak.
Mr. Sander?
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Good evening, Mr. Korczak. Are you familiar with other Wawa convenience store / gas station locations throughout Bucks County?
Yes, I am.
Would it surprise you that there are approximately 21 facilities in Bucks County that have both convenience stores and gas stations?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Do you know how many of those have more than 6 gasoline pumps?
Well,
Object to the relevance of how many. It's a question of whether or not the ordinance is arbitrary and unreasonable and capricious.
You're going to overrule the objection. You can answer that question.
the number, I can only speak for the Wawas that I've worked on. I did work on one in Salem Township, which had 8 pumps.
8 pumps in Salem.
Yes.
Was that 3620 Street Road?
Yeah, it's on the corner of Street Road and Kingston Way.
We agree with you, gentlemen, we're talking about pumps, we're talking about dispensers.
Dispensers, correct. Are you aware that there are, out of the 21 facilities in Bucks County, 17 of them have 6 gasoline dispensers?
Objection again, same basis.
Overruled again.
I'm not aware, but I guess I am now.
And do you have any knowledge regarding whether those Wawas with gas dispensers are successful, with 6 gas dispensers are successful in business? I'm just asking if he knows.
We're going to sustain that objection. I think this is outside of, first of all, we're not sure what we mean by successful, and I'm also not sure.
Are they operating, you're not closing them down?
But this, I'm not sure if that's what in this witness's area of expertise. So we'll sustain that objection.
And witness would probably agree with you.
And that there's at least one Wawa in Bucks County that has 6 gasoline dispensers on a property more than 5 acres, almost 6 acres in Bristol Township. Are you aware of that?
Objection again.
We'll overrule that objection if you know, Mr. Korczak.
No, I don't recall.
Okay. Mr. Korczak, when you prepared the plan depicting a sign at the main entrance to the Wawa, which is located as far south, it's the southerlymost entrance off of Lower Silver Lake Road. When you prepared a monument sign for that entrance, did that sign face onto the bypass?
First of all, I don't believe it's been established Mr. Korczak designed the sign. I think he testified to the location of the two signs.
I'll agree to amend the question to deal with the location of the sign. That sign face onto the bypass?
At the main entrance?
All the way down south at the main entrance to the, not the right end only, the main entrance with the full turning movement
Yeah.
on exhibit A5
Yeah, in my opinion, that sign does not face the bypass.
does not face onto the bypass. So that Wawa would be able to install a sign there with gasoline prices,
Yes,
correct? With the name Wawa and the corporate logo.
yes.
And how about the facade of the Wawa convenience store building itself that faces Lower Silver Lake Road, that faces south? Would Wawa be able to put a sign on that facade noting the name of the company and its corporate logo that would not face onto the bypass?
Yes,
So you'll agree with me that there is signage permitted on this property, even though the entire property is located within 1,000 feet of the bypass, that would not be violative of section 1103C4 of the zoning ordinance.
yes,
And you will agree with me, Mr. Korczak, that at the prior hearing at which you testified, the zoning hearing board determined that the proposed scrolling sign was in fact an electronic message center.
Okay, for the question, but I can stipulate that that's what the board has found. I mean, the decision speaks for itself again, but I think it's.
Right. That's.
Well,
Yeah.
if the witness should answer if he knows, if the stipulation aside, I agree with Mr. Van Luvanee. The board can take notice of its prior decision in this matter, but since we have a question for the witness, he should answer it if he knows.
I disagree with the stipulation. That's a put my 2 cents in.
Understood, but I think we're gonna get to a point where this board knows what they ruled on in the earlier hearing. I don't think we have to stipulate anything, because I think that this board knows what they ruled in the prior hearing. Again, Mr. Korczak, if you know the answer to the question, you can answer. If you
First of all, I
don't,
don't think it's been established that you read the decision.
Mr. Korczak, do you know the answer to the question?
I asked him if he was aware that the zoning hearing board in its prior.
Are you aware of that decision?
yes.
And again, Mr. Clark and zoning board members, I'm asking the question because Mr. Van Luvanee opened up the can of whether it was internally illuminated, it was backlit, it was, if it wasn't an electronic message center, it would comply. But this board has ruled that it is one, and I wanted to ask Mr. Korczak if he was aware of it. Okay. I have nothing further from Mr. Korczak, thank you.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Korczak. You testified earlier in response to a question from Mr. Van Luvanee that there was no engineering reason why you couldn't put 8 dispensers on this site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But isn't that also correct with a lot of projects, why you can't put a higher density, be it dispensers or houses or offices? Many times it's just a legal requirement.
Well, I object to the form of that question. Unless you're saying that eight dispensers is more dense, Is that what you're suggesting?
This man has,
There's a question, there's an objection, we'll overrule the objection. Mr. Korczak, can you answer the question?
This site meets the site design requirements, all criteria of the OR office research for the E30 use. It would not cause us to exceed impervious cover. There's no reason that I perceive, like I said, that 8 pumps from engineering.
Dispensers.
8 dispensers could not be permitted on this site.
that's not the question I asked. The question I asked her is, in your experience, have you had other projects where you weren't allowed to build as much as you could build due to some limitation in the zoning ordinance? Be it a density limitation, limitation on the number of pumps, a limitation on the number of parking spaces? Is it always an engineering determination that limits how much you build on a site, in other words?
I'm going to object to the question unless it's limited to have you ever had a project where the number of dispensers was limited by the zoning?
No, that is my question, John.
I know it is.
Mr. Van Luvanee,
I
it
just-
doesn't make it.
Okay, please. Mr. Korczak, can you answer the question?
Specific to dispensers, no. I can't think of a project I worked on that was singled out or limited to the number of spaces based on the size of the site.
Once again, that's not the question I asked. That's the question Mr. Van Luvanee asked. The question I'm asking is, sir, have you had projects where you were forced to limit the amount of structures or buildings you were constructing on that site due to a zoning restriction rather than an engineering restriction?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Van Luvanee also asked you, and I just, since I was not at the prior hearing, he said that the applicant had requested an interpretation regarding whether the proposed signs were violating the restriction against signs facing the bypass within 1,000 feet of the bypass. Was that a variance request, or was that an interpretation request, if you know?
Put times
Well,
so
Do you know what the zoning hearing board decision stated in response to each of those requests?
I'm going to object again, the decision does speak for itself.
I'm just asking if he knows.
Well, if he
Those
knows,
objections overruled. You know.
I believe my testimony, and I continue today, that the monument sign outside or by the bypass, yes, it would be visible, but it does not face the bypass.
I'm asking, sir, do you know what the zoning hearing board decided? Not what you testified to, but what they decided in the prior decision as to this particular question?
I don't know, but I know that variance was denied.
Okay. Do you know if they actually issued a decision on the interpretation question?
I don't know.
Thank you. Now, you just testified that the proposed sign near the main entrance, the full access entrance, as well as the wall sign facing south towards Silver Lake Road, since neither is facing the bypass, both are allowed under the zoning ordinance. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Are there any other signs or any other signage that you're aware of that the zoning ordinance would allow on this site?
No.
No,
No,
no other signs, or no, you're not aware of any other signs?
No other signs.
Okay, so you're testifying that the only two signs that could be allowed on this site are that particular wall sign and that particular monument sign,
They were not facing the bypass, correct?
because they're not facing the bypass. Thank you, that's all.
Mr. Van Luvanee, any redirect?
no redirect.
Mr. Sander, any follow-up questions based on questions from Mr. Nelson?
One quick follow-up, Mr. Clark, thank you. This is based on the last question that Mr. Nelson asked. Mr. Korczak, did you examine the plan marked as Exhibit A5 and determine whether there were any other locations on the property that you could erect a sign identifying the property or information about the property?
Yes,
You did. Did you, where the road bends at the corner of the parking lot, did you check that location right there to see if you could put a sign, some kind of Wawa identification sign that would not face onto the bypass?
at that corner there, I would say that that would be facing the bypass.
If it was behind the last parking space where the road bends, I'm talking about the southeast corner of the Wawa building, extended out toward the parking area.
Yes,
You did prepare a plan that shows that?
no, I did not prepare a plan, but the signs would serve purpose based on the location that are proposed today, or on this plan, to identify where you enter the building, or where you enter the main drive aisle, and as well as the sign along the bypass that would provide people with notification that there's a Wawa here. We do not have a road we do not have a driveway on the bypass.
I understand that, but I'm asking you whether you examined the plan and did you in fact, engineering-wise, rule out any other signage except the two that we discussed would be permissible? The one at the main entrance and the one on the south side of the Wawa building. Did you rule out the ability to place any other sign on this property that would not face onto the bypass?
I would say I ruled it out based on location would not serve the proper purpose.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Now I have one question. Page 33 of its decision, in discussion of the argument, the zoning hearing board said, instead, if the sign is oriented to be visible and legible from the bypass, the sign would face onto the bypass. So with that, assuming that that is a definition of facing onto the bypass, Mr. Korczak, would any of the answers that you gave to Mr. Sanders' question or Mr. Nelson's question be any different?
Visible is different.
Visible and legible.
Visible and legible would be different than facing, in my opinion, yes.
All right, but the zoning hearing board found that visible and legible, any sign that is visible and legible faces onto the bypass. My question is, if you could see a sign, are there any other locations that where you could put a sign where it would not be visible or legible from the bypass other than the ones that you described?
There would be other areas on the site that would not be visible or legible from the bypass.
So you could drive by without seeing any identification. You might see a building, you might see the roof of a building, but you couldn't tell what the building was.
Correct.
That's all. Here, I'd like to talk to Mike Redel, please.
Oh, my apologies. Mr. Korczak, if you could take your seat again. Do any members of the...
Sorry, gentlemen.
That's my fault. Thank you. Do any members of the board have any questions for Mr. Korczak? Not even me.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And just give your name.
Michael Redel, R-E-D-E-L.
Mr. Redel, what is your business address?
260 West Baltimore Pike, Wawa, Pennsylvania.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Wawa Incorporated. I am a real estate project engineer.
And how long have you been employed by Wawa?
24 years,
How long have you been a project engineer?
23 years.
And what is a project engineer in Wawa's terminology?
I'm primarily responsible for shepherding new store projects through the entitlement process, working closely with our developer partners to maintain Wawa standards.
Just so it's clear, is Provco one of your developer partners?
Yes.
And what is the geographic area of responsibility, of your responsibility?
Just shifted with the new year, I'm responsible for the entire state of New Jersey and select projects in Bucks and Montgomery County.
During your career with Wawa, could you provide the board with an estimate of the number of Wawa convenience store projects that you've seen through from start to finish as far as permitting process is concerned?
I've never added it up. I would say I'm north of 150 over that span.
How many of those were those projects that had fuel attached, fuel sales as a component part of the sales?
Nearly all. When I started at Wawa, the emphasis was to build only fuel stores and replace existing non-fuel stores with fuel stores.
You familiar with the property that's the subject of this application?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And do I understand, Mr. Redel, that you're actually a resident of the vicinity of Bucks County?
Yes.
So you pass this site frequently, right?
Yeah, I live in Lower Makefield, so I use the bypass frequently for business and personal reasons.
So you knew about this location before Wawa selected it as a project site, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I assume, since you're here tonight, and since there's a Wawa proposed for this site, that Wawa corporate believes that this site is a suitable site for the development of convenience stores selling motor vehicle fuel, is that correct?
Yes, we do, very much.
Are you involved in the site selection process as well as the development?
We have real estate managers. Their primary function is to go out and find locations that are appropriate, and I support them with site layouts prior to getting a lease for the site.
Are there certain site characteristics that Wawa looks for when you're deciding on whether a site is an appropriate site or not an appropriate site to develop as a Wawa convenience store selling motor vehicle fuels?
Yes, we like to be on primary roadways, at an intersection with a signal if possible. We like a minimum traffic count of 30,000 cars, I'm sorry, 25,000 cars per day. Local housing and businesses as well.
And with respect to the current site, is the fact that the gravity fronts on the bypass one of the features that makes the site desirable?
Yes, so this site meets all those criteria in spades, really.
If it didn't front on the bypass, would it meet those criteria?
No.
Mr. Redel, you're familiar, I believe you understand or are familiar with that in this procedure, Provco is challenging the validity of 3 provisions of the Joint Municipal Zoning Ordinance, correct?
I understand.
Okay. The first of these provisions deals with the number of permitted fuel dispensers, and You've been involved in not only the prior hearing, but I think you've also been involved in the land development process. You know what the plans proposed, correct?
Correct.
In fact, you've been consulted by Provco from time to time on certain design aspects of relating to the land development plans for this project.
Yes.
Is that correct?
In some detail.
The drug municipal zoning ordinance ties the number of fuel dispensers for a convenience store located in the OR district to the size of the property. And in this case, I believe you're aware that it limits the number of fuel dispensers to 6 on property less than 5 acres. Based on your experience, on a site that is greater than 4 acres but less than 5 acres, is there any physical reason to limit the number of fuel dispensers to 6?
Well,
Other than the zoning?
yeah, at this particular site, no. There could be site constraints, wetlands, which aren't the case here. But if we have between 4 and 5 usable acres, we would easily be able to fit 8 dispensers.
In your experience, Mr. Redel, is there at some point a correlation between the size of the site and the number of fuel dispensers that you can or should place on the site?
Certainly. Our target is roughly 2.5 acres. On the 2.5 acres, we can fit our prototypical building, 50 plus parking spaces, and 8 fuel dispensers with appropriate circulation and engineering design for stormwater and so forth.
Now, if you have less than 2.5, a site of less than 2.5 acres, what are the factors that determine how many fuel dispensers you can locate?
Again, it's very much about usable areas and not just a blanket 2.5 acres. So it really does depend on other site restrictions. But we have other smaller sites where we have fewer dispensers. In fact, we're doing development right now in Upper Southampton on a site that's 1.17 acres. And we're putting a prototypical building and 4 dispensers.
So there's some site correlation, but once you get past 2.5 acres of a usable site, there is no correlation. Is that what you're testifying to?
Typically, that's very true.
When you're designing your sites, you made a comment about the number of parking spaces being typically looking for 50, I forget your number, but it's 50 something, right?
Yeah, 50 to 60 is typical.
Do you change the number of parking spaces on a project if it has 8 fuel dispensers versus 6 fuel dispensers?
No, there's no correlation between parking and the fuel dispensers. The parking is meant to serve the building, the store.
And is that based on your experience, that it's the store that is the driver as far as the number of parking spaces?
Yes.
Korczak testified that the site plan that was submitted for land development and which is shown here in A5 would change as far as the layout is concerned, whether you had 6 dispensers or 8 dispensers, correct?
Correct.
Is that correct in your experience with most sites?
Yes.
Yeah. With respect to traffic circulation, in your experience, does the number of fuel dispensers have an impact?
Yes, it can. So if a site is particularly busy during peak times when, which is for fuel dispensing is in the afternoon, people will often get gas on their way home. So that is when we have our peak, and that's when we need the most pumps, so that we have a number of fueling positions to serve the customers. If the customers come on the site and we don't have enough dispensers, there will be stacking, potential circulation issues.
So, if there is a correlation, do I understand your testimony to be that on sites at busy times, if there is an impact, the impact is not because, the traffic impact of having fewer dispensers, there is a traffic impact if you have fewer dispensers, but not if you were to increase it to 8 dispensers. Is that what your testimony is?
Correct.
The other two matters that we're discussing here tonight relate to signage. I think you're familiar with the limitations imposed by the joint municipal ordinance on signage, correct?
Yes.
From an operational standpoint, Mr. Redel, what is the importance to Wawa of having signage visible from perimeter roads?
Well, we're a retailer, like any other retailer. We rely on the traffic that's on the roadway. As a convenience retailer, we rely on it even more. So a lot of our customers are already on the roadway. They're passing by and they identify that we are at the location by the signage.
In this case, you indicated that the fact that this property fronts on the bypass was one of the factors that made the site desirable.
Correct.
Okay. From an operational standpoint, you believe, as Wawa believe, that signage that is visible from the bypass is important to the operation and success of this store.
Yes, I do.
Could you explain that?
Well, a lot of the traffic that will be traveling the bypass travels the bypass on a daily or weekly basis. But then there is also a lot of traffic that does not travel the bypass frequently. There's St. Mary's Hospital, someone may be going to for the first time. A lot of people visit the area to go to Shady Brook for seasonal festivities, not familiar with the area. And our signage would allow those customers, especially that aren't familiar with the location of the Wawa, to see it and to safely maneuver into the site.
Have you ever been involved in the development of a Wawa that has frontage on but not access from a limited highway, limited access, I would say, to the bypass?
Yes.
And other than this project?
Yes.
Okay. Have you been able to obtain signage for those projects that were visible from the limited access highway?
Yes.
This is the first time you've experienced an ordinance that purports to prohibit you from having signage visible from the limited access highway on which your property has frontage.
Yes.
Okay, with respect to the issue of electronic message centers, as this ordinance is defined, you were advised early on that Newtown Township has historically resisted the use of LED lighting. That is correct?
Yes.
Okay. Rather than pursue LED lighting, did Wawa agree to the scrolling price sign module that we've shown here in our book? I think you're familiar with it. I'll show it to you behind tab 6. The Skyline products will scroll inside Wawa.
Yes, reluctantly, but yes.
Yes, okay. Now, you also are aware, I believe, that the zoning hearing board determined that the scrolling sign was also an electronic message sign, correct?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, council, also what kind of sign?
All of the Wawa's.
I didn't think that end of yours was also determined that the scrolling sign was also an
Electronic message center.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you. All Wawa stores with which you are familiar or changes in gas prices controlled from inside the store.
Yes.
They all controlled electronically.
Yes.
In its 2021 decision, the zoning hearing board concluded that scrolling fuel price signs fell within the definition of electronic message center, in part because the changing of fuel prices would be effected electronically. If no electronic means of changing fuel price displays were permitted, what alternative would be available to Wawa to change fuel prices?
You know, then the only way to change the prices, I believe, would be manually. So we go back in time to manually changing the prices.
As long as you've been with Wawa, you ever had to change signs in any store manually?
No,
They've always been changed electronically.
as far as I know, yes.
That concludes my direct examination of Mr. Redel.
Mr. Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Good evening, Mr. Redel. Were you, I forget your answer to Mr. Van Luvene's question, were you involved in the choosing of this site for the Wawa?
Not the choosing, we have real estate managers that go find the sites, and I help them analyze the location for viability for Wawa.
And were you aware at the time that you decided to go forward with the project on this property that the site and the ordinance would limit you to 6 pumps?
Yes,
Okay. And you knew that there was a prohibition against signs located within 1,000 feet of the Newtown bypass, the limited access portion of the Newtown bypass facing onto the bypass, you knew that that provision existed?
yes, although we didn't know exactly what it meant. My interpretation of facing was different than the township's.
But you were aware there was, it might have been an interpretation issue and there was some question as to whether you were going to be able to get the signage you wanted.
Well, in my view, our sign would not be facing the bypass, so that was not the issue. The township later determined that a sign visible to the bypass was considered facing the
When you
bypass.
say the township, you mean the zoning hearing board, I think, to
Oh.
distinguish from the.
I understand that.
I think we all understood.
And agree to that clarification.
Thank you.
You said one of the reasons why you want to locate Wawa here is because it's located on a primary roadway at a signalized intersection, correct?
Yes,
And that would be an advantage to you, and this property fits that criteria?
yes,
It fronts on the bypass, but it doesn't have access from the bypass, correct?
correct.
Now, you gave a lot of testimony about the number of gasoline dispensers and the size of property. You said that, you mentioned the number 2.5 acres several times, and you said that 2.5 acres was, correct me if I'm wrong, was good for 6 pumps.
No, I believe I said 8. Typically,
2.5 acres is good for 8 pumps?
often, yes. Yeah, as I said, the site, there may be other site constraints to consider, but very often we can fit 8 pumps on 2.5 acres.
Could you fit 10 pumps on 2.5 acres?
10 pumps,
Dispensers.
10 dispensers is something we don't do very often.
Why?
Because we found that there's a point of diminishing return, that those extra dispensers are often not used.
Well, if they're there and they're available for busy times, what harm do they do?
I don't know if they do harm.
Okay. Why not 12 or 14 dispensers so that anybody who ever came onto the property at whatever time it was could never have to wait in line?
It's very much a hypothetical question, in that, if 10 is a diminishing return, as I said, then 12 and 14 certainly would be more so.
Again, let's go back to 10. You said it wouldn't be doing any harm. When you say a diminishing return, you have economic study of numbers to show that a site with 10 gasoline dispensers would lose money versus a site with 8?
I'm going to object to this line of questioning. Again, that's not the issue in the case. The issue is whether or not, from a land use perspective, there is a correlation whether the township had a reason to limit the number of dispensers based on the size of the property, and whether it's totally arbitrary. There are always business reasons why people do things.
Mr. Van Luvanee opened this up, and the testimony was about 2.5 acres, and that's perfect for 8 pumps, and I'm following that up. I'm taking it to its logical
We'll
conclusion.
overrule the objection,
Thank
but
you.
I hope we're not gonna go 12 pumps.
I already did the 14 and 12. We're not going to go there anymore.
I
Try to
decided
get
the subject of economic viability.
Well, your witness did.
We'll limit it a little bit.
Your witness did. Your witness used the term.
We'll limit it a little bit. So, Mr. Redel, you can answer the question if you remember what it was.
I don't know.
Could you just restate the question, please?
I think it was, why not 10 or why not 8?
Well, wait, no, I said you used the term diminishing returns, and if you said that they wouldn't do any harm being 10, do you have any evidence to show that there would be a diminishing return?
Objection again, that does not go to the number of
Okay, well, we're gonna overrule that objection, we're gonna answer this question, and then maybe we're gonna start moving away from this, but just, we're gonna answer this question.
So I don't have that evidence, but as we get beyond 8 pumps, then we're above, we likely would need more acreage. Those sites are more difficult to find, they cost more money. We found that our standard of 8 pumps at a location like this with high traffic volumes would be ideal.
Well, let me hit you with another site that has high traffic volumes. New Rogers Road in Bristol. Are you familiar with that site? 3260 New Rogers Road in Bristol.
Is that by the tech school?
I don't know, I'm just asking you if you're familiar with the site.
I don't know it by that, the roadway.
Well, New Rogers Road is a heavily traveled road in Bristol, would you agree?
Yeah, I don't want to speak to a site that I'm not exactly sure that you're talking.
You didn't work on that site?
Again, we haven't established that we're both talking about the same site.
Well, I assume you're familiar with your locations in Bucks County that you're responsible for and that you've worked on, Mr. Redel. I'm asking you about a specific one, and you're telling me you don't really know what it is or where it is.
By the way you're referencing it, I don't. Do you have a map?
3260 New Rogers
Right, so
Road.
know the addresses for all the walls.
Mr. Redel, do you know that site? Do you know which one he's?
I don't, I'm not
Okay,
playing a game
that's
here.
fine. No, I know you're not playing games. But Mr. Sander, if he doesn't know that site, we can't ask him questions about that site.
Well, okay. I don't know if he might know about it, but he doesn't know that he knows about it. It backs up to the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It's located at, it looks like Bath Road and Durham Road, where they intersect.
Yeah, by the new. Yes.
Oh, this is New Rogers. Oh, I see New Rogers Road, right? Where it is. You familiar with that site?
Yes.
You are, okay. You know how many acres that site is?
No, I don't. I'm familiar with, I'll clarify, I'm familiar with that site. I did not do the approvals for that store.
Okay, but you're familiar. Do you know how many gasoline dispensers there are on that site?
Not offhand, there's 6 or 8.
Would it surprise you to know that based on an aerial photo and personal visualization, there are 6 pumps located on a 5.72 acre site? Would that surprise you to hear that?
The 6 does not. The size of the property, I really don't know.
And are you aware that 17 out of the 21 Wawa convenience store gas station facilities in lower and middle Bucks County have 6 pumps, 6 dispensers, and not 8?
Objection, yeah, it's not relevant.
That's the entire county, I apologize, that's the entire county.
We're going to overrule the objection, but I am beginning to agree that we're getting a little far away from relevance, so I may be sustaining an objection I'm down the road, but this one I'm overruled.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I don't know the count. I'll take you at your word. That sounds like it could be accurate.
And locations with 6 dispensers operate successfully, don't they?
Objection again.
We're going to overrule the objection.
Yes, but I would say that every site is different. Many of those stores are located in relative close proximity to other locations, so we have more saturation. This location is definitely does not have the support of others the way most of those do.
Again, I'm asking questions about the lot size and the number of pumps because you said that 6 or 8 pumps is appropriate for a specific acreage. You said 2.5 acres a number of times in your testimony. I guess I'm asking these questions to show that there may be a relevant tie-in to the size of a property and the number of dispensers. Were you ever aware of any other zoning ordinances that limited the number of dispensers, or did you just develop these things and put in as many as you wanted?
I don't recall working with ordinances that limited the number of dispensers.
Okay. Does Wawa pay any more rent to a owner, a developer like Provco, if it has 8 pumps versus 6?
Not directly. We're going to pay based on location and lot size, and if the developer can deliver the prototype that we asked for. In this case, it's the number of dispensers is not a factor.
Is not a factor.
Not a factor.
So that, just to be clear, Wawa will pay Provco the same rental if there's 6 pumps or 8 pumps on this property.
Again, that's irrelevant.
And we're going to sustain that objection.
I object to the sustaining of the objection.
Your objection to my ruling is no.
You will agree, Mr. Redel, that you filed, Provco filed a land development plan that showed 6 pumps and was pursuing that application and hoped to have that approved by the Board of Supervisors. Is that correct?
I don't recall what was submitted.
Well, my point is, if you don't know that the plan was submitted by Provco to the township, that was recently denied that showed 6 pumps? You're the project director for this, for Wawa.
Yes, I know that, I didn't see what was submitted. I know that we have been talking about 6 dispensers because we were denied for more than that.
Okay, so you pursued a plan for, Provco pursued a plan for 6 pumps, and if Provco was willing to live with that plan, subject to what happens on appeal from this zoning hearing board's earlier decision, why would you be concerned with the number of pumps you have on the property?
Objection, that isn't the issue.
Sustained.
All right.
Isn't that relevant? He made a point about that.
Nothing further, thank you.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes. Mr. Is Redel?
Redel.
Redel, Mr. Redel. Just to confirm, based on the prior decision of the zoning hearing board, the actual use is allowed here, correct?
Correct.
And so we're now arguing over the extent of the use, what exactly is encompassed by the use at this point in time, correct?
Yes.
Now, as I think, based on your earlier testimony, the number of pumps generally is a business decision by Wawa. It's not being really controlled, for the most part, by the size or the location. It's Wawa determines, do we want 4, do we want 6, do we want 8, whatever. There is really a business decision most of the time, correct?
Yes, but there's a lot that goes into that decision.
But there might be sites which are large enough to accommodate more pumps, but Wawa determines that's not the best use of their funds and they'll go with fewer pumps. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, as I was getting to earlier with, in Lower Bucks County especially, where there's the greatest saturation of our fuel stores are, we have just a number of fuel stores along Street Road. So it would make more sense, even though it's a very busy road, to have 6 dispensers, because 2 miles away we have another 6, and 3 miles away we have another 6. So in this location, so when I talked about earlier about the circulation being better on a site when there's more and customers don't have to stack, it's in that case on Street Road, if someone's driving by and they see, well, that looks full, I'll go to the next one. This location, that won't be the case. So we think having the extra 2 dispensers will help. It'll be a better convenience to our customers and will help with on-site circulation.
Now, it may help with on-site circulation because you don't have stacking, but the more pumps you have, you actually could have issues off-site with more traffic because you're drawing more cars in, correct?
I'll let our traffic engineer speak to that. I don't think, I don't know that correlation to be true.
You don't know what the answer is, or in your experience, you don't believe that's true?
In my experience, I don't believe that's true.
So in the current challenge, are you familiar with the current challenge that was submitted that led to this hearing?
Yes, not in great detail, but yes.
Are you familiar with the fact that one of the arguments you made is that while there's limitations on this B30 use, there's no limitation, E30 There's no limitations on the E10 service station use? Are you familiar with that argument?
No.
Can you explain why Wawa feels the current limitations in this particular site are unreasonable? On the number of pumps?
I don't know what they would be based on. The site is large enough. It demands the extra dispensers because of, again, the lack of other types of businesses in the area, including other Wawas that serve fuel. And that it can be fit within the impervious coverage of the design that Bohler did without impacting stormwater design or other features of the site plan.
So are you saying if this site was developed in 10 years and in the intervening decade, 5 service stations within 3 or 4 miles of this site were built, at that point in time it might be more reasonable to have 6 dispensers instead of 8 on this site?
Yeah, I'm rejecting you. Let's look at it.
Yeah, I'm gonna sustain that objection.
It's based on his own testimony. He says the reason why they do 6 in Lower Bucks is because they have more, they're closer. I'm just, exploring that particular testimony.
We're gonna sustain the objection. You're asking him to speculate what Wawa may do if in 10 years other gas stations are built nearby, and I don't think that's the issue at hand.
I think it's the issue at hand because if it's unreasonable now, it's unreasonable forever, and he seems to be testifying, well, it won't be unreasonable in the future if there's more gas stations in the area or more Wawas in the area.
I think that's the wrong way to look at
Okay,
it.
but this is fine. I sustain the objection and move on to another question. Thank you.
Will do. So other than eliminating possible stacking during high volume periods of time, what would having more dispensers get Wawa for this site?
Objection, that's not the issue. The issue is whether there's a reasonable zoning purpose to limiting the number of dispensers based on acreage. That's the issue.
The
It's not wrong.
cross-examination is based on the direct examination and what he testified to.
We're gonna overrule the objection, and Mr. Redel, you can answer the question if you need it repeated. I'm sure Mr. Nelson can.
No, that's okay. So we will sell more fuel with 8 MPDs than we do with 6 at this location. That's not necessarily true at every location, but for the reasons that I discussed and outlined, at the peak hours when people buy fuel, typically, again, like I said, on the way home, the fact that there would be 2 more dispensers would accommodate more fueling during that window of time as people are passing by the site on the way.
Does having more people stop for fueling drive the other sales inside the store?
Objection.
Overruled.
There's less of a, some of this is proprietary, there's less of a correlation with those higher volumes of fuel sales relating to the inside store sales. So at certain times of day, people are focused on getting fuel for the next day and getting home for dinner.
And the inside of the store sales have a higher profit margin than the
Objection.
correct?
That we're gonna sustain.
Moving on to the signage. I believe that the engineer, Mr. Korczak, testified that he felt there's actually two signs that were allowed on the site. The wall sign that faced south, as well as the lower monument sign by the main entrance. Do you agree with that assessment?
Correct.
And are the additional signs really needed above those two?
Additional signs to those.
Those two signs, yes.
I'll object to that. Again, the issue is whether or not the ordinance prohibiting any signage that faces the bypass is valid or not valid, not whether or not it's really needed. I mean, that's a subjective determination.
We're going to overrule it, and you can answer the question, which I think you already did. But if not, if you want to ask it again, go ahead.
Besides having those two signs that are currently allowed, what would additional signage do for the site?
We would like, what would it do for the site?
Yes.
Yeah, I did outline that earlier. It would notify the majority of the traveling public that will pass this store on the bypass to identify it as a Wawa, to identify the fuel price, and so that they can make the decision to whether or not they want to go to the Wawa or not.
Doesn't the design of the store, the color of the store, the design of the canopy sort of serve that same purpose? In that you have a unified design at most Wawas that you can just see the building and be like, if you're in the area, oh, that's got to be a Wawa.
Again, I'm going to object. This is an objection to the way of this blanket prohibition of signage facing the bypass within 1,000 feet.
There's an overrule that objection. Understand the question, Mr. Redel.
So I agree with you that if you were sitting at the light facing south on Lower Silver Lake Road, or I guess it's Newtown, Yardley Road, in that location, and you're looking across and you see the Wawa and there's no sign, you'd probably say that's probably a Wawa. But if you are, like I am, focused, on the road and your cone of vision as you're driving, people do rely on the signage that they see to identify retail that's where the buildings are set back, as this one will be.
But also, people rely a lot on Google Maps and that other sort of technology these days, more so than signage to find places.
I wouldn't say more so. I think some people do. That's not universal, certainly.
So once again, as I asked with the pumps, why do you believe these sign restrictions or requirements under the zoning ordinance are unreasonable?
Objection.
Sustained.
On what basis?
Well,
I can sustain the objection.
Mr. Van Luvanee is objecting to every fact question we asked his witness
And the fact
on the
question-
basis that they're irrelevant to the legal issue. Let's skip testimony and go directly to legal argument in that case.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Mr. Nelson, you can move on to your next question.
What would happen if this Wawa didn't have frontage or didn't have the ability to put a sign up along the bypass? What impact would it have on this particular store?
Objection calls for speculative answer. I don't have objective to answer what his personal opinion would be.
I'm not asking if he's done a study. I am asking as an expert with 24 years of working for Wawa, 23 years, I believe, was working as a...
Your question is what impact it would have on the validity challenge that's in front of us now, or what impact it would have on
What impact
the way they would operate this store, or whether they would do things differently.
On the operation of the store.
Well, the reason for the objection is he's already testified that he's never had a store that had access, that had frontage on a major highway where they didn't have signage that was visible from the major highway. I don't know how he could have an opinion as to the impact.
And I'm asking him
All right,
what happens
we're
if
going to
it...
overrule the objection. Mr. Redel, you can answer the question.
Well, that's exactly what I was gonna say. I mean, we've never done it. And so it could, I can only speculate that having no signage will be detrimental to the store, and to the public safety.
So why is your inability to put up an electronic message center unreasonable? Or how does that negatively impact your operation of the store?
I think I just said we would anticipate people traveling, and our traffic engineer, I think we'll get into this. If you don't see a sign in enough time, but you recognize the canopy of the building as you assert, you wouldn't see the canopy of the building until you're much closer and need to make that decision to turn in a much shorter time. And that's the public safety element that I referred to.
I'm asking you about the posting of the prices. So what's the drawback of putting prices up manually as opposed to electronically?
Oh, I wasn't clear on your question.
No, I wasn't clear on my question. I apologize for that.
So we're agreeing to signage that would not be LED, that would have the appearance of an older style price sign, but that would be electronically changed from inside the store. It's an associate employee safety issue, that we're not sending someone out there to the sign to change those prices, once or more per day, and in all sorts of inclement weather, so rain, snow, heat. So it's not efficient when we could push a button from inside the store and change the price.
But at the end of the day, as far as informing your customers, whether or not the price change occurs inside of the store by pushing a button, or someone walks out to the store and maybe spins the wheel to adjust the price, as far as the customer is concerned, there really is no difference or impact, correct?
Correct.
Regarding electronic message center, EMCs, and whether or not your signage constitutes one, do you know?
That's not really the issue here.
Well, let him finish his question,
Go ahead.
and then you can object.
Do you know if you ever officially requested an interpretation from Newtown Township as to whether or not the sign you're proposing falls under the definition of a EMC?
I can answer that, Mr. Nelson, we did.
Well, let the witness answer if he knows.
But you need to file the application.
If he knows, he can answer, and then if not, again, it's all part of the record here too.
That's
So even
true.
if he can't answer it, the board's aware of what occurred. And you can argue it later in findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Well, I don't have to argue it because it's in the
Right.
record.
Mr. Redel, do you know?
What?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of the determination.
So you don't know if a request was filed with the Newtown Township zoning officer as to whether or not your sign met this definition?
This is just a recollection thing. I don't recall.
That's fine. If you know it, you know. If you don't, you don't. So be it. Do you know if any sort of determination was ever filed with the Newtown zoning officer regarding this project?
Again, I don't recall the specifics. I wouldn't do that.
Can you just 1 second, please? Sir, if perchance this appeal does not go your way and you still decide to build the project, would it, in your opinion, would it be a viable store that would function appropriately?
Objection.
Yeah, I'll sustain that.
I'd like to hear a basis, please.
I don't think that's the issue that's in front of the zoning hearing board. It's not the basis of the validity challenge.
Yes, but it's what Mr. Van Luvanee is trying to argue in support of his validity challenge, so I think I have the right to explore that further.
I don't believe Mr. Miller.
I sustain the objection, so I think we can move on.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Van Luvanee, any redirect?
Yes, Mr. Redel, I think you, in answer to one of Mr. Sanders' questions, indicated that you knew that there was a limitation on the number of homes when the lease was signed. Thinking back, I'm going to ask you, at the time your lease was signed, there wasn't an ordinance that permitted this use in place, was there?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't recall the sequence of events.
Because the ordinance, I don't have the date with me, but the ordinance was passed sometime in 2020, as I recall correctly. And I think Mr. Sanders nodding his head affirmatively.
I believe it was 2020.
Yeah.
September 23rd, 2020.
Yeah, the end of 2020, so you signed the lease before that, hadn't you?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
All right, so at the time you signed the lease, the use wasn't even permitted, was it?
No.
So you wouldn't have known how many dispensers were or were not permitted if the ordinance hadn't been amended, okay? That's all, just a clarification.
Thank you.
In answer to one of Mr. Nelson's questions, I think you agreed with him that the number of fuel dispensers is a business decision that Wawa makes,
Yes.
right? Other than this particular instance, can you recall an instance where the zoning ordinance interfered with your ability to make a business decision as to how many fuel dispensers you were going to place on a site?
Objection. Same objection Mr. Van Luvanee has been making all night. That doesn't go to the questions before the zoning hearing board.
But absolutely it does, because that's what the cases talk about. Whether the municipality has a right to interfere arbitrarily with business decisions, and follow the direct.
Objection's overruled. You can answer the question.
No, and I think that question was asked previously, not directly with regard to number of dispensers, perhaps indirectly based on impervious coverage.
Now, you said you were sitting on Newtown Road at the intersection, looking across the Newtown bypass at this site, and you saw the canopy. You might recognize it as a Wawa.
I did say that.
If you were a person who had never seen a Wawa before, would you recognize it? You couldn't recognize it as a Wawa, could you?
Correct.
And even if you recognize it as a Wawa.
Objection.
No such person exists.
No, I mean, these are the same sort of questions.
I'm following your
that-
The basis of your objection, Mr. Nelson?
It's based on Mr. Van Luvanee's argument. This supposedly has no bearing whatsoever on the underlying issue in the case of a substantive challenge.
But you were given the right to ask the question, so.
So we gave you a little latitude in asking those questions. We're going to give Mr. Van Luvanee a little latitude in asking this question, but
I'm not
hopefully
going to
we'll move
spend
on.
any time on this, but
Mr.
you've
Redel.
never seen a Wawa, you couldn't have recognized it as a Wawa, could you, Mr. Redel?
No, so I got into some testimony earlier about how, yes, many people using the bypass use it every day or every week, but there will be a lot of people that don't use it, and that this location will be new to them, and, you know, people visiting Bucks County from another part of the country, people going to the hospital, going to different areas, there's a lot to do. This is basically, the bypass is the gateway into Bucks County for a lot of people from I-295. And not all those people, you know, coming up from other parts of the country know Wawa.
So one more question. You were sitting there and you were a person who did recognize it as a Wawa. You would have no ability to know whether or not you were selling fuels there, would you?
If I saw the fuel canopy, I might, but if the pricing wasn't available to see, then I wouldn't know how much it was. People tend to buy fuel often by the price of the per gallon. Without posting that, I certainly wouldn't know that.
No further questions.
Mr. Sander, do you have any recross?
I do, thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Redel, are you aware of the policy that was the basis for the enactment of the 1,000-foot rule regarding signs that face on the bypass, that the challenge is challenging, section 1103.c.4?
No, I'm not.
When was your lease signed?
I do not know.
But you answered yes when Mr. Van Luvanee asked you whether it was signed after the ordinance was enacted, but you don't know when it was signed.
No, not exactly.
Okay.
Just for clarification, I think he testified he signed it before the ordinance was enacted.
Correct.
I'm sorry, before,
That's correct.
before the ordinance was enacted, you testified, but you don't know when it was. Okay. Do you know from your business experience and the existence of the many Wawas that you have played a role in the last 24 years, what the percentage of impulse buying customers versus folks who set out to specifically make the Wawa a destination?
I don't know. I don't know if we have studies on the impulse. Our traffic studies have delved greatly into pass-by versus destination, which somewhat gets to what you're talking about.
Yes, yes. Do you have knowledge of the ratio of pass-by folks who see a sign and say, "Ooh, I'm going in there," versus those who set out from their home or coming home from work or already on the road, knowing that they're going to go to Wawa?
You know, it's different for every store. Really depends on the demographics. You know, how much daytime population, and I would prefer to. We have an expert traffic engineer that's done studies and could give you a better answer than I could.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Nelson?
You missed, in response to a question by Mr. Van Luvanee, you mentioned impervious surface restrictions sometimes limiting your site development. Could you expand on that?
Sure. So the impervious coverage limits the amount of area that we can pave. So if there's a restriction on what's permitted, then that may squeeze the drive aisles, the number of parking spaces, the number of dispensers, even size of the building potentially.
And you've actually had that happen in previous projects?
Yes.
Thank you, that's all.
Do any board members have any questions of Mr. Redel?
I have one question. Did you mention earlier that one of the criteria for considering a given site is that it generate traffic in the amount of 25,000 cars per day?
No, no. When we look for a site, we look for, to locate on roadways that have 25,000 cars per day. That's traffic that's already on the roadway, not traffic that Wawa's generating.
And so the bypass meets that criteria, so you can conduct a study that indicate that there are 25,000 cars per day on the bypass.
Well in excess of 25,000.
Thank you.
Certainly.